so much. I do everything. I do a lot of stuff for everybody else.
Hello and welcome to the Narc Alert, where we take a look at different YouTubers and point out some traits that fall within the spectrum of narcissist personality disorder. Tonight we're going to start a new series called Storytime Sundays, where we will take a look at crimes and criminals involving narcissism. We're taking a trip across the pond to the UK to look at Brian Blackwell. Brian Blackwell's crimes were attributed to narcissistic rage after being confronted and questioned by his father. Narcissistic personality disorder was used for the first time in the United Kingdom in his defense, and it provided mitigation to his crime. Heinz Kohut was an American psychoanalyst who focused on psychoanalytic theory. In his book, Thoughts on Narcissism and Narcissistic Rage, he coined the term narcissistic rage, highlighting the risk of violent rage from narcissists if they're challenged or feel rejection. After being psychologically tested, Brian Blackwell was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, showing all 9 traits on the scale. According to Dr. Kohut, it's almost unheard of for one person to have all 9 traits on the narcissistic scale, but those who do have the potential to be extremely dangerous individuals, with those around them being at the most risk from what is termed narcissistic rage. Brian Blackwell was born in 1986, an only child to Sydney, a retired accountant, and Jacqueline, an antiques dealer. When Blackwell was 2, they moved to an affluent village in Melling in Merseyside, where they bought a 3-bedroom bungalow. Blackwell was seen as a gentle boy, but a bit of a loner, with a passion for science. His parents insisted he was destined to not be just a doctor, but a surgeon. He attended a private school set in Lancashire countryside, but was moved in 1998 to Liverpool College, a private school costing £7,300 a year. During his final year, he began dating Amal Saba, the 18-year-old daughter of a respected medical family, and both applied to read medicine at Nottingham University. It is around this time his lying escalated. He applied for 13 credit cards in his father's name and attempted to obtain a cash advance from the bank by falsely claiming to be a professional tennis player who needed money to play in the French Open later that summer. He wrote on his application form that he'd be able to repay the loan with his fabricated salary of £45,000 a year. His girlfriend at that time believed he was a professional tennis player with a sponsorship from Nike, that he had a £60,000 Mercedes and a £450,000 flat in the same complex where footballer Steven Gerrard lived. With a savings bond that his parents had intended for university, he bought his girlfriend expensive gifts, like a brand new car, and hired her as his manager, writing her a check for £39,000 that bounced. When his mother found out about the lies he told to the bank and the large withdrawals he had made, she contacted the bank manager. On July 24th, Blackwell used his father's credit cards once again to book flights from New York to Miami, Miami to San Francisco, and San Francisco to London. The following day, he used the cards again to book a first-class flight from Manchester to New York. The next day, July 25th, Brian Blackwell was at home, hanging some pictures in his bedroom. His parents had been out for dinner, and when they returned home, the family sat down in the living room for a few drinks. The conversation soon became an argument between Brian and his father. It turned nasty, and Brian flew into a rage and began beating his father with the claw hammer he still held in his hand. His mother, who had been in the kitchen, ran into the room, holding a carving knife, and witnessed her son brutally bludgeoning her husband. She tried to stop Brian, but he wrestled the knife from her grasp, and he stabbed her up to 30 times, mostly in the chest, killing her. He then returned to his father, who was not yet dead, and after holding his hand and telling him he was sorry, he stabbed him to death. The next day, Brian and Ms. Saba flew to New York, where he spent almost £4,000 on a 3-night stay at the Plaza Hotel. They traveled to San Francisco, Miami, and Barbados before returning to Merseyside, and Brian continued to act as though everything was normal. The couple returned home on August 12th, and Brian stayed with Ms. Saba's family after explaining to them that he was locked out of the house until his parents returned from Majorca. In the meantime, the police had been called to Brian's family's 3-bedroom bungalow on September 5th after the neighbor reported a strong, unpleasant smell. During an interview, Brian claimed he knew nothing of his parents' deaths and he was on holiday when they were murdered.
I'm here, obviously because the police suspect me for doing this. I've been asked a number of what I consider to be slightly relevant questions. I believe that should be done more as a witness rather than a suspect. The reason I was arrested was because I admitted to going to the house. There's other people who have been up to the house, so obviously in my mind I'm wondering why they haven't been arrested. But I think I've proven that I've not been here when it's happened. And obviously, if I wasn't here to do it.
After 2 days of questioning, Brian's story began to change.
I had, during the day, been putting up pictures on my wall. I'd just come into the lounge and started having a discussion. It got to a violent stage in the arguments with my dad, where I obviously felt under pressure enough to push back, and I struck him with the soft side of the hammer. You know, the part you hammer a nail in with. It knocked him back slightly. It was a split reaction. My mum was in the kitchen, obviously heard the commotion and everything. She came in with a carving knife up in a stabbing motion, obviously for self-defense. I swung more than anything, swung the hammer just to get myself free. I'm not sure who exactly I've struck, where, how many times or anything. And I remember I did take the knife. I just remember my dad lying in his seat. And there was some blood coming up. My mum said, "What did you do, Boo?"
He confessed to the murders.
I spoke to him for a bit and told him I still loved him. I probably believed what I'd done. I saw my mum and she seemed alive. When you say she seemed... She didn't look cold or like a dead person. I thought she may still have been alive. For some reason I can't honestly explain. I pulled this bathroom. I think I splashed some water on it and asked her to come back.
The trial began in June at the Liverpool Crown Court, presided over by Judge Mr. Justice Royce. A team of 5 psychiatrists examined Brian Blackwell and unanimously agreed that he had narcissistic personality disorder. People with this disorder typically fantasize about unlimited brilliance, power, and success, and they often fly into an inappropriate rage if their fantasies are challenged or threatened. Brian Blackwell was described as a highly abnormal young man, adding that an NPD diagnosis was unusual for someone of his age. Due to Brian Blackwell suffering from severe NPD, and despite the fact that these days cases of diminished responsibility are extremely rare, Judge Royce accepted the plea to drop the charges of murder in favor of manslaughter.
The thing was, though, I didn't think that the blade had particularly gone in deep, because I don't know how easy a blade goes into somebody, but it was just short jabs. It's probably the blade was about an inch away from him each time. And with my mum, and I couldn't see it because he was very close. I thought it was barely. But I couldn't believe that someone would die so easily. It seemed like just a bit of commotion. I couldn't believe that someone would have died so easily from that.
Blackwell admitted manslaughter with diminished responsibility, and on the 29th of June, 2005, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge added that in his opinion, Blackwell would never be fit for release. Brian Blackwell was sent to Swinfen Hall Prison, a young offenders institution in the county of Staffordshire. In 2016, after an oral parole hearing, the parole board granted Blackwell's release. What a lovely chap! I hope you enjoyed tonight's little story time. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on narcissistic rage, especially as a defense for murder. Kinda interesting, isn't it? We will be back next week with more Narc Alerts. I'd love it if you'd like, subscribe, and for sure leave a comment. This one should bring up some interesting discussions, don't you think? Don't forget to be kind. Hasta luego.